Hi, I'm John Nunn, and in this video I'm going to talk about the Ultimate Chess Puzzle Book, which I believe was the first puzzle book ever produced by my company, Gambit Publications, back in 2000. Seems like an age ago now, but it was a successful book pretty much straight away and continues to sell well today. Well, it gives me the chance to talk about chess puzzle books in general. What makes a good chess puzzle book? Well, you have to have a fair number of puzzles, and there are 1,001 in this book, so you can't say it's not good value for money. The print version is $26.95, but there's also a Kindle version for $9.95 and the app version at $12.99, which is what I'm using actually to show you the positions from the book. Enables you to play over all the moves on the screen. In the old days, before chess databases, compiling a puzzle book was quite a lot of work. You had to go through magazines, searching out positions, go through tournament books, perhaps you remember a few, and the result of this was that a lot of old puzzle books contain the same positions recycled again and again. Well, these days, or for at least the last quarter of a century, only the laziest authors can get away with doing something like that. With the advent of chess databases containing millions of games, there's a huge reservoir of material to choose appropriate positions from. Of course, some positions may not be suitable for making into puzzles. They're too complicated, too simple, or perhaps there are multiple solutions. So you still have to do a fair amount of work, but it certainly reduced the burden substantially. Well, one way in which puzzle books differ from one another is the way in which they organise the material. It could be organised by difficulty, elementary positions, then medium difficulty, and so on. And to some extent, that's the approach taken by the Ultimate Chess Puzzle Book. It starts fairly simple and works its way through to more complicated positions, although, in fact, none of the positions are that difficult. There's also some intervening chapters. There are some positions from Soviet championships, and there are a series of test sets which you can mark yourself to see how you're getting on. Other puzzle books organise the material by theme, pins, skewers, mating attacks, and so on, and others just, mix them all up. That's sort of the approach that I took when I wrote John Nunn's chess puzzle book. That's largely a mixture of varying difficulty. Anyhow, as I say, the Ultimate Chess Puzzle Book starts off with fairly simple positions and works its way up. And I'm going to show you 3 positions which I'm going to give you the opportunity to solve. One from the early part of the book, which is fairly elementary, one from the middle, and one near the end. And that should give you a good idea of the range of difficulty which is covered in the book. So let's go to the first of the 3 positions. I have it here. It's white to play in this position, and you can see, based solely on material, white is down on material. He has the exchange less and also a pawn less, and black has 2 connected pass pawns on the queen side. On the other hand, white's 2 knights and rook are in dangerous attacking positions, and the black king is looking very exposed. Well, white can win here. And now's your opportunity to pause the video and think about it for yourself. Okay, let's take a look at the solution. If I click on the hyperlink, we can go to the position, which is from a game Piquet Gelfand, which was actually a blindfold game played in the Monaco Melody Amber series of tournaments. White can launch a decisive attack. He starts with a rook check. Black has only one legal reply, and then the only difficult move in the solution is this quiet move with the rook, putting the rook on the 7th rank and confining the black king, and then with a threat, and the threat is mate in 2 with check, king in the corner, and rook mates. It's a standard mating pattern with knight and rook against the king in the corner. Knight stands 2 squares diagonally away from the corner supporting the rook, which will give us mate. So if we go back to the position after white's second move, the only way black can defend against this threat is to play his knight to d5, which defends f6 and stops the knight check on that square. But this allows a different mate, where white checks with his rook instead, and now there are 2 possible mates depending on which way black moves his king. If he goes in the corner, then white can mate with his knight, either here or on g6. If, on the other hand, black meets the rook check by playing the king here, white actually again has a choice of knight mates. He can go again to g6, or alternatively he can go to d7. So it's actually a forced mate. Not too difficult, but in a way a little bit surprising that there's no way to avoid the mating attack. Well, let's go straight on to the next position I've chosen using the Chess Studio. That's our app. It has a bookmark feature, and I've bookmarked the 3 positions in advance. So here we are. This time it's an endgame puzzle, queen and pawn endgame. White is in fact pawn down, but he has a very dangerous passed pawn on the 7th rank. White can win here, and now you should pause the video and try to find the solution for yourself. Okay, let's again click on the link and go to the solution. In the game, white actually did not find the way to win. He played his queen to d8, which is perhaps the most obvious move, supporting the pawn and making ready to promote it. But that actually allowed black to give perpetual check. The queen can give checks on c2, and if the king goes to h3, the queen gives a check on h7, king goes back, queen checks on the c2 again. There's no way to evade the checks, because any attempt to interpose with the queen along the d file would leave the c pawn hanging. So the queen move to d8 was a mistake. White actually missed a win, which depended on defending the pawn with the queen and also using the queen to prevent black's perpetual check. So the winning move is to go queen h7. The check on c2 is again prevented, and white has a deadly threat, which is to check on g8 and then promote the pawn. And thanks to the exposed position of black's king, it's pretty much impossible for black to prevent white making a second queen this way. I mean, let's just have a look at a couple of variations. Perhaps the most interesting is if black just plays, well, queen c5, which introduces a new perpetual check possibility, playing the queen to f2. Now white wins quite nicely. He gives a check on h4. Now there are 2 possibilities. If black plays his king to f5, there's actually quite a neat way to win using only checks. White first promotes his pawn, and black takes it, and then white gives a queen check, skewering the king and queen. Notice that this sequence involved only checks, so black had no opportunity to start giving checks himself. There's a second possibility. If black retreats his king, then white gives a check, king goes to h6, and now the black king has been pushed out of the way. There's no perpetual check. Let's just see that. White promotes, now black checks, king goes up, check again, king goes up, check again. There's only 1 check at each moment, and now white can interpose his queen. After the further check, white interposes his other queen, and that's the end of the checks, after which white can win very easily with his extra queen. So this was an example where it was a little bit more difficult. As I say, this comes from more or less the middle of the book. It's position number 450 out of 1001, where it's possible to go wrong, as indeed white did in the game. Right, well, let's move on now to position number 3, which is towards the end of the book. Okay, this, in a way, isn't so difficult, even though white managed to get it wrong in the game, but you have to be alert. It's an unusual position. It's 2 bishops and 3 pawns against a queen. and white has an extremely dangerous passed pawn on the 7th rank. Well, as the text says, white now played bishop takes a7, and the question is, why is this a mistake? And I can add a kind of subsidiary question which isn't mentioned in the book. Can white actually win this position? Okay, here's your chance to pause and think about the solution. Right, let's jump to the solution and see what actually happened. White made the mistake of taking this pawn, which is probably the most obvious move because it immediately threatens the pawn promotion on b8. But this allowed a very surprising draw by black. Black found the correct continuation. He checked, forcing white to retreat the bishop. Now, of course, the pawn is again threatening to promote, and white's also threatening to promote the second pawn by pushing his pawn to a7. But black found the surprising king move, which at first sight doesn't really threaten much because the potential checking squares of the queen are covered by the bishop on e4, but in fact it does have a threat, and the threat was indeed executed after white played his a pawn up, black played his queen check, forcing white to take the queen. It's the only legal move, and black is stalemated. And it's quite surprising, if we go back to the position after black's second move, black is actually threatening this queen sacrifice, and there's no way that white can stop it. Promoting the pawn doesn't actually make any difference, and the bishop has to stay on the diagonal anyway to prevent black's mate on g2. So there's no way that white can avoid black sacrificing his queen to force the stalemate. Well, if we go back to the original position, now my subsidiary question is, well, how should white win the position? In fact, there are many moves. Almost any move wins, but white just has to be careful not to move his bishop from g1. The point then is that if black, for example, plays his king, well, let's suppose white plays perhaps the simplest winning move, which is to play c5. White has a multitude of passed pawns. Pawn on d3 must stay where it is to defend the bishop, but the c pawn is free to advance, and the simplest is just to push the pawn, and eventually white will succeed in overwhelming black's position with his pawn armada. If black plays his king now to h3 so as to threaten again queen f3 check, then white gives a bishop check, king goes away, and then pawn check. The stalemate is destroyed, and white then wins easily. So if we just go back a few moves, after white plays, for example, c5, black perhaps just waits with his queen, for example, to go here, but it's easy enough now to win. White can play, first of all, white can push the pawn to c6, but also white can play his bishop to g2, preparing h3 check to drive the king away and relieve the stalemate possibility. If black pushes his pawn, white just puts his bishop back on e4, and again there's no stalemate. The black king's in the open with plenty of room, and then white can win by playing, for example, c6 and then bishop takes a7, which now does indeed win, and the huge mass of pawns will be too much for black's queen. So although that puzzle was only a few moves deep, it did involve an unusual motif, namely stalemate in a position where there were still a number of pieces on the board. One normally thinks of stalemate as occurring in positions with very few pieces, for example, some king and pawn endings, but here it occurred in a different scenario to what one would normally expect. Well, okay, that gives you an idea of the difficulty in the book, from the more elementary examples to the more complicated. It's a great book for club players, and with 1001 positions to solve, it's going to keep you busy for some time. Okay, thank you for listening to this video, and I look forward to seeing you for the next one.